Hello, I am Dr. Shernette Grant, and I want to welcome you back to another episode of Leadership Plus with Dr. G. This is a podcast where we keep it real about what it takes to lead, grow, and inspire others to being their absolute best, and I get to be your host. Thank you for joining me, and of course, I would be remiss if I did not remind you to go back and check out the other previous episodes. Leadership Plus with Dr. G is available on all your favorite streaming platforms: iHeart, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Castbox. Be sure to check that out. And of course, like, subscribe, and most importantly, I ask that you share, because I know you know somebody out there who could benefit from these insights, and we don't want to keep this all to ourselves. All right, so today we are going to be tackling a topic that I like to call another of the silent killers of performance and innovation, which ultimately decreases the success of the organization. It is mediocrity. Yep, not just in individuals, by the way, but also how it spreads within the team like a wildfire and an invisible toxin that's just ready to destroy the work, ready to destroy the organization, and of course, destroying the individuals as they go along. Mediocrity does not announce itself loudly. It doesn't show up, with a warning sign. Instead, it is something that just kind of creeps in very subtly, very quietly, and very dangerously sometimes. It usually starts out with one person perhaps cutting a corner, right? One team member deciding that good enough is sufficient, or a leader also deciding that good enough is sufficient. And if that's you, shame on you. A few deadlines missed here, no real consequences. And then before you know it, it's a culture where mediocrity is accepted. It has become the norm. And, you've created a culture where, feedback about work and progress is avoided because individuals don't want to rock the boat, and just enough is good enough for the organization, for the individuals, and for the work. It is contagious, however, and it will infect the entire team. So while it may start out with one person, before you know it, whether you are in business, in nonprofit, in education, or in a corporate space, you need to understand that mediocrity is not just an individual problem. It is a cultural disease that spreads from one team member to another. And once you recognize it, you have a responsibility to do something about it. Think about it. Have you ever been on a team where someone constantly underperforms, but nobody addresses it? Nobody says anything. Nobody addresses it. Maybe they show up late, they miss deadlines, or they bring down the morale with just negative attitudes. At first, the high performers get really frustrated about things like that. And they just keep pushing through. They just keep pushing through. They try to compensate or overcompensate because they're trying to make up for the individuals who are not carrying their load or doing their part. But over time, here's what happens. Something very dangerous starts to happen. The overperformers, or the high performers rather, they start lowering their own standards. If Johnny is not performing to these standards, why should I? I don't need to. Johnny's getting the same paycheck. Johnny's getting the same rewards. Nobody's addressing Johnny's underperformance. So all of a sudden, now you have Joe, who used to perform at high standards, making that conscious decision that they don't need to push forward the way they used to. Why? Because leadership typically allows it. And these individuals, they see it and they recognize that their efforts don't matter as much as they thought. They recognize that excellence isn't always required. It's just suggested. It's a suggestion. It's not an expectation. And they recognize that the bare minimum is acceptable because no one is being held accountable. Does that sound familiar? And once that mindset starts to spread, the damage is done. The damage is done. It is done. And here you have mediocre leadership that encourages this kind of behavior, and you as a leader will start to see mediocre results as well. Let me be very clear. While we may be discussing individuals with mediocre and substandard attitudes towards work, mediocrity is a leadership issue. And if you're a leader and you tolerate subpar performance, you are silently endorsing it. If you refuse to confront underperformance, you are telling your team that excellence is optional. So what happens if you decide to take action? What happens when you as a leader decide you are going to demand high performance and hold your people accountable? What happens when you decide you don't accept or won't accept complacency as part of the culture? What happens when a leader models the level of excellence that they expect? You know what happens? Individuals start to rise. The team rises. That's the difference between leaders who maintain and leaders who transform. Leaders who maintain are okay with the status quo. They are afraid to confront these kinds of issues, and they're okay with just is. Leaders who transform, they step into these things and they address them. Because if you don't address them, whether it's in the one or the two, it is eventually going to affect the entire team, the entire work, and the entire organization. So, how do great leaders tackle mediocrity head on and transform their teams into high-performing, unstoppable teams? Right? How do you move from a culture of excuses to a culture where excellence is the only standard? How do you create an environment where mediocrity simply cannot survive because other members of the team are going to hold each other accountable and make sure that individuals are performing at high levels? How do you create an environment where people are just naturally driven to step up, naturally driven to deliver results and push beyond their comfort zone? That's what we're going to break down today. So, if you are looking to eliminate mediocrity in the workplace, in your environment, if you are looking to make sure that your team continues to perform at high standards, I want you to think about these simple things that you can do. One, you need to set high standards and make them a non-negotiable. Non-negotiable. Set very high standards and make sure your team knows exactly what those are. Hold yourself accountable before you hold others, because sometimes it's a trickle-down effect from us as the leader. So make sure that you are living up to the standards that you have set. You have to address mediocrity immediately before it spreads. When you see it, address it. Be bold enough to address it. Don't settle for it. You must address it before it spreads. Build a high-performance driven culture where excellence is the norm for your team. They know that nothing less is good enough. And surround your team with talent, with top-tier talent. And sometimes you may just have to remove dead weight. Make tough decisions that protect your organization from complacency. This is not just about improving productivity or outcomes. This is about a shift in mindset. This is about reshaping the culture and redefining what is the norm and what is possible for your team. Mediocrity is very costly. It's very costly. It's very costly to the organization. It doesn't show up overnight. It starts small. And before you know it, you have a problem. Here are some of the consequences if you allow this to continue. One, it lowers morale. It lowers morale. Because like I said before, high performers thrive in high performance environment, and they want to be surrounded by individuals who are driven and motivated like they are to bring their best to the table. But when they see the underperformers, they get frustrated, and all of a sudden you're not getting much out of them as well either. And once those high performers become disengaged, you have lost them. You have absolutely lost them. Mediocrity reduces productivity as well. It reduces productivity. It produces mediocre results. Deadlines are slipping. The work is piling up. The team is slowing down. Meetings become useless because people just come in unprepared. People are making mistakes. And you're having to do the work multiple times, which leads to wasting of time and wasting of resources because you're constantly having to rework and nobody's being held accountable for any of those things. It forces high performers to pick up the slack for those who are not performing, and not only is that a dangerous place to be in for the high performer who will soon recognize that their efforts are not necessary in their eyes, but it also causes them to be burnt out, and before you know it, turnover, and you're losing your people. It can be very exhausting, but it's completely avoidable. Do not allow mediocrity to create a culture where minimum effort is okay. Make sure people know what is acceptable. Make sure people know through your leadership that excellence is the only option. Mediocrity kills innovation also. Mediocre teams don't innovate. They don't push boundaries. And if you are not pushing boundaries and challenging the status quo, you are not innovating. You are not taking any risks. And when you encourage or co-sign a complacency sort of a mindset in your team, then the work will never evolve. It will never evolve. Individuals do not feel like they need to think out of the box. They don't feel like they need to do anything different because the same old is always good enough. When challenged, they don't feel the need to work harder or do better or think differently. They ask themselves, why should I be looking for creative solutions? Because nobody's pushing me to do this. And the best companies and the best teams and the best leaders need to constantly be innovating and always evolving, always challenging themselves and challenging their teams, because stagnation is considered failure. Mediocrity in the workplace also damages your leadership reputation, leaders. If you allow it, you will lose credibility because your team is watching. They are watching. They see who you hold accountable and who you don't. They see how you handle conflict or if you avoid it. Whether or not you follow through on high expectations is what they sit around and watch to make sure that what you are saying is what you are doing. The words come out of your mouth need to align with your behaviors and your actions. And if they see that you're tolerating excuses, underperformance, laziness, they're going to lose respect for you. That is a fact. Great leaders are those who build trust. Trust comes from consistency, standing by your values, standing by your standards, setting those expectations. And if you accept mediocrity, your team will start to wonder, first of all, if you even care. Are you even trying to be great, or are you just there for a paycheck? They will start coasting too, because apparently that's allowed in that space and they see it. So your leadership reputation is also built on what you allow. It's not just for individuals that are working under you, but this is for you as well as a leader. So be very clear about that. How do you go about tackling this? You must, like I said before, eliminate mediocrity. If you want a high performance team, you must build it with intention. Leadership is not just about managing people, it's about creating environments where excellence is the standard. And the truth is, mediocre teams exist because leaders allow that. That's just the simple truth. If mediocrity exists on your team, you have allowed it. And that's a hard pill to swallow for some of us. but it's also empowering because it means you have the ability to change it. You have the ability to change it. We already talked about things, the basic things you can do. Let's talk about them some more. Set uncompromising standards. The number one reason that teams are mediocre is because the leader has not set clear, high standards. If people know exactly what is expected, how they can meet the expectation, they will rise to the challenge. So ask yourself, what are the non-negotiables for excellence on my team? Are my expectations clear? Are they measurable? Are they challenging? Ask yourself, have I communicated what exceptional looks like? Or are you expecting people to just guess? They are supposed to just know. No, it is up to you to make sure that you have clearly communicated what exceptional and what excellence look like for you, for the team, and for the organization. Because mediocrity will creep in when expectations are very vague. When great leaders don't just say, "Oh, do your best. Oh, just handle it." They define exactly what high performance and what best looks like, and people will be able to do that. Some simple examples, right? Let's talk about customer service in the customer service space. Instead of communicating well, you tell your folks, communicate well. No, set actionable, measurable standards. Respond to emails, for example, within 24 hours and ensure that all client interactions are documented. That's a very simple example of how you can set clear standards about what you expect. You can't just say to individuals, be sure to meet deadline. What deadline? Make sure that you are specific. The deadline is by 5 p.m. on this date, no expectation. You can't just say to your team members, "Oh, be accountable." No, you have to be very specific. You are responsible for your KPIs, and here's what they are, and we will review them weekly, monthly, whatever that looks like. You have to be very clear. The mistake leaders make is that they set these standards, but they're also not enforcing them. Some leaders make that mistake. They might set the standards, but they don't enforce them. So you also have to enforce. You have to follow through. A standard that is not enforced, it's not a standard, it's just a suggestion. You're not giving suggestions. You are giving standards of expectations, standards of performance, standards of excellence. And the only way, we have a saying that we use often, especially in education, inspect what you expect. I think that is valid no matter what industry you're in. Inspect what you expect, because the moment you stop inspecting, then the expectation no longer exists. And you have to model the standard yourself. The fastest way to kill a high-performing team and bring mediocrity to the forefront is that you yourself are missing deadlines. You're not prepared for meeting. You lack accountability, but you want to call others out on their mistakes. Lead by example. Show up on time. Be the most prepared in the room. Continuously invest in your own growth. Read, learn, challenge yourself. Be disciplined. Execute your goals and hold yourself accountable. Demand excellence from yourself before you expect it from others, because when your team sees you live in these standards, they will also rise to meet it. So you must identify and address mediocrity immediately. You cannot ignore it. The longer it goes unaddressed, the deeper it takes root, and all the warning signs are going to be there. Don't look for anything coming down from the heavens. Like I said, it doesn't show up with announcements. It doesn't show up with a horn. It's very subtle. Sometimes you don't even notice it. A missed deadline here, a lack of enthusiasm or effort, right? People who are disengaged in a meeting, or you have a discussion with the team and they're not contributing. Mistakes that are being repeated over and over. No improvement because nobody's holding that person accountable. Nobody's providing the necessary support the individual needs to do better, right? So now excuses become the norm instead of accountability. So it's important that you are having direct conversations with individuals when you start to see these things. Don't sugarcoat performance issues. Be very clear, be very specific, and be very firm. Provide feedback immediately. Don't wait until performance review time. Address it in real time. When you see it, address it. Don't wait until the end of the year or 6 months down the line to, bring up all the things that happened from, day 1 to day 500. No. You want to address these as you go along and give individuals a chance to course correct, right? Give them a chance, give employees a chance to correct themselves and not slip even further into mediocrity. Give them a clear plan for improving their performance. And if they don't improve, you may have to make some tough decisions. You may have to make some tough decisions. They either need to level up or you know what? You may have to go into leave. Level up. They must level up or that may not be the right place for them. So when you create a performance-driven culture, mediocrity is going to flourish. Is not going to flourish, right? Mediocrity only flourishes in weak environments where there's no accountability. Your job as a leader is to build a culture where excellence is expected, where it's measured, and by the way, rewarded. So set goals with clear metrics. Implement regular feedback loops. Annual reviews, like I said, are too late. Regular feedback loops. And recognize the performers. Celebrate them. Celebrate them. Because you do not want to lose them. And you want to encourage the others around them to stretch themselves for the same level of performance. Surround your team with excellence at all times. Hire people who challenge the norm. Don't hire based on comfort. Hire people who raise the bar for a change. Develop a continuous learning culture, right? Invest in training, invest in mentorship, invest in professional development for your team, and create opportunities for your top performers, by the way, to lead. Help them to grow. Career pathing, it's very important. Help them see what it is that they can aspire to be, because you want to inspire them to step up. You want to inspire them to go beyond what they're used to and go for high standards, and high standards will attract high performance. Low standards attract complacency. So leaders who want great teams must understand that you must build an environment that great people want to be a part of. That's just a fact. You must build an environment where great leaders, great individuals want to be a part of. Okay? If you're hearing this and you're either struggling with that or you yourself might need to step up, I want you this week to identify one area of your, whether personal, professional life, whether you're the leader or you're leading, whatever your space is. I want you to identify one area where you can pinpoint that mediocrity is creeping in. Do your own audit. Do it right now. Take an honest look at yourself, at your work, the individuals you're leading, because it's probably there. It's probably there. And ask yourself, what can I do to address this? I want you to take one concrete step that you will make this week to address an area that you can see mediocrity creeping in. Is it that the accountability is low? Is it that you haven't communicated? Is it that you have not created expectations? Is that you have not created KPIs? What does that look like for yourself? Are you just not following through? Are you unmotivated? What does that look like for you? You have to stop accepting mediocrity, because when you do, your teams will transform. And when your teams transform, your organization will elevate. And when your organization elevates, your impact is undeniable and unstoppable. So, with that said, I don't want you to just listen to this podcast and go back to business as usual. I want you to be a part of the Leadership Plus movement, a movement where we want more, we demand more, we expect more. We build teams that are driven by excellence because you as a leader has set the bar. You have set the bar. So as you go into this week, like I said, identify the mediocrity on your team. take some bold actions this week to address it. And of course, be sure to share your results. Drop them in the comments. Reach out. I'd love to hear how you are starting on your transformational journey, because it's important that you as a leader, it's all about you. If you allow it, it will happen. And I know you're not going to allow it, because you're an exceptional leader, and exceptional leaders build teams that thrive, that innovate, and teams that win. It's been great. Demand excellence from your team. Never settle for anything less than the best, because leadership isn't about what you allow. It's about what you create. And you have the power to create something extraordinary. So go make it happen this week. Don't accept mediocrity. Eliminate it. Ciao.